we're about to get into some super jam-packed, like really powerful tips on how we can make our music sound way better, and it's all going to be for free. Now, when I say for free, I do mean free. I mean you don't need to go purchase extra stuff for this. Bear in mind, I'm going to be doing all of this using my iPad Pro right here using Beatmaker 3. So aside from having an iOS device and Beatmaker 3, you don't need anything else. Now, you can do several of these things can be done in any DAW. Probably most of them can be done in any DAW. So this is really globally applicable when it comes to your setup. So first things first, we're gonna go ahead and pull up Beatmaker 3. And I'm gonna pull up a song that I made recently, an instrumental that I made recently on the last live stream. So I'm gonna pull that up. There's some things I did in here that are really subtle, but I do it in almost every track that I do. So first things first, I want to talk a little bit about stereo separation. Stereo separation makes a huge difference in the way your mix sounds. You just got to know when to use it, how often to use it. One thing that I like to do for stereo separation is I like to stereo separate my hi-hats, especially when it's a live sounding hi-hat. Stereo separation is good. Now, you can do this with plugins. There are good plugins out there, but there is the OG way to do it where you don't need any plugins. You can create stereo separation on your own. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. This can be done in any DAW. So let's take a look at that. So if you look real quick, I have, I'll just play you this section of the song real quick. All right, so that's what we got so far. That is actually the chorus section of this track. I'm pretty stoked about it. Anyway, let's get into the stereo separation. So on these hi-hats right here, they are stereo separated. So if I go into my patterns, I have a pattern called hi-hat. There's my hi-hat pattern right there. I played it in using the pads. There it is. So what I did was I went ahead and I just duplicated my whole drum rack right here, duplicated my bank, and here it is down below. I just put the hi-hat pattern down below. Now here's where the stereo separation comes into play. So the first thing you need to do is zoom in really close here. We'll set our snap to free. It's really important. Zoom in and look at that. You can see right here, the full drums, the one with the hi-hat up top, the blue one, is earlier than the hi-hat below. So I literally separated them away from each other. So you can do that manually just by touching and dragging. Now I would use it on the free snap, no snap, because it's really just a tiny adjustment. If I zoom out here, you can barely even tell that I moved it. It's a really slight move. So you just move it over and you can kind of listen to it as you move it. When it's too far apart, you can tell. So right here, there we go. Okay, so you can hear that stereo separation. What I'm getting at right here is if I were to, move this too far apart, it's gonna start to sound like two different hi-hats. So like, if I play that, and that gets a little crazy. So you gotta really just play with it until you get that lined up where you want it. All right, so you've got your hi-hat duplicated, and this isn't just for hi-hats, but I'm just giving you an example real quick. The next thing I did was I stereo panned them. So this bank right here is one of the hi-hats, and if you tap in here, the sound that I'm using is right here. That's my hi-hat, and it is stereo panned a bit to the right. Now notice I didn't pan it all the way. You can play with that as well to get it to your liking. I did the same thing with the other one right here. This channel is panned to the left. So we got a left and a right. That creates stereo separation, and it really does fill up the sound, a little bit more with the hi-hats. They're a little bit more noticeable. I did this also on my track called Stars, my song called Stars. If you stream that up on Spotify, but I did that in that song as well too, and it really does make a difference. All right, so that was stereo separation. Now, obviously, you can do that on several other things. That is just the most basic way to do it. If you're new to any DAW and you're like, I don't know how to use their stereo plugin, Do stereo separation yourself. It's not that hard. The stereo separation plugin that's built into Beatmaker 3, in my opinion, I don't like the way it sounds. It doesn't separate enough to me. Something doesn't seem quite right about it. So I could just be my own not understanding of it. But anyway, let's move on. The second one is side chaining. Now I have done actually a whole video on this, and I'll try to remember to link that in the description, but you can definitely check that out on my channel. It's called How to Side Chain in Beatmaker 3. But I could really just spend a whole video worth of time on side chaining, but I will not. I'll just talk a little bit about how to side chain and what I side chain in my songs. So the kick is the main thing you want to be side chaining. It's really going to make a huge difference in your mix when the kick can cut through that mix, so the kick doesn't have to be overpowering. Now this also helps down the line when you're trying to get into your mixing stage and your mastering stage, because the kick is going to be your main culprit when it comes to peaking, and it's going to make it really hard to compress your song later and still have it sound good, because your kick is competing with everything else in your mix, and it's just pumping and pushing your mix into that really loud sound, and it makes it really hard to compress later. So getting your kick under control is important, and the way you can do that is create a side chain on your other instruments. So let's just choose an instrument for example. I have this main synth right here. Now, I don't know if you guys heard that cutting out in the back, that in the background of the synth. That's actually the kick cutting through. Even though the kick's not playing right now, that was the kick cutting through. So if I were to go in and solo the kick along with this, you should be able to hear how the kick is cutting through here. So let's play it again, this time with the kick. All right, so I don't know if you guys could tell, but the kick, when the kick is playing, the volume of that pad is ducking down and getting out of the way. And we're gonna do that we've done that with several things here in this song. So let me show you how I did that. So we're gonna click that channel, the one that I put it on, and this is what you use. Use a dynamics processor, and it's one of the built-in effects in Beatmaker 3. Now there's other ways to sidechain, there's other plugins for that, but I'm just going to show you the way to do it in Beatmaker 3 because in my opinion it is the simplest. So you would just go in, hit Dynamics Processor right there, and then I already have one up, so I'll just show you. This is what it will come up with. You'll make sure your mode is selected to compressor, and then sidechain input. This is really important. You have to set this. So you go in, you got to find what bank your drums are in. So mine are in bank A1, and then I click select pad, and then I hit my kick right there, decap kick. That's the one I used. And now it is side chained to that kick. That was it. Now, beyond that, you need to dial in your settings. And that's where you would do that here. And I'll show you that in just a sec. Make sure you tweak these settings. Some of the main settings I tweak are the threshold. Now, this is a negative number. It says negative 33 decibels. Let me pull this up so you can see it. So negative 33 decibels under threshold. The lower you make that number, as in like the more I drag this down this way, right, the more intense the effect is going to be. The more of the volume it's going to cut out from this pad. So as you drag that down, that's what will happen. The ratio, as you adjust that, is basically how harsh or how soft your cut will be. It's either chopping right off the top or it's kind of chopping at a slant, so it's not as aggressive. It has like a delayed attack. And the same thing for here. So here's the actual attack right here. You can change that as well. I generally have mine set either to 1 millisecond or even all the way down to 0 or 0.1 milliseconds. Release is going to be how long it's going to be ducked out for. So the higher the release, the longer it's going to take for the sound to come back from the pad. 30 milliseconds is what I have it set to for this one. and then your knee width is 2. That also has to do with the curve and how soft or how harsh that chop is. Here's another pro tip. I often use this look ahead mode. I'll pull this up so you can see it better, hopefully. Look ahead mode is on. Now, that also, in my opinion, definitely helps with it not being so harsh. You can adjust your look ahead time. What I'm assuming this is it's preemptively reading the audio that I have for this pad, and it is already doing the function of sidechaining, doing the compression ahead of time, which it seems like makes a better sound, not as choppy. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I feel like is happening. All I know is look ahead mode tends to make it quite a bit less dramatic of an effect. All right, so you can put sidechain, you can do a sidechain with any instrument. Write this down. The things I would almost always sidechain to your kick, all right? Sidechain pads, sidechain your pads, or any harmonic instruments, your pianos, pads, things like that. I almost always sidechain that, and that's usually one of my more aggressive sidechains. All right. Next thing I would think about is hi-hats. I actually sidechain my hi-hats to my kick, so the kick can cut through the hi-hats just a little bit. And that one I don't do too aggressively, it's just a little bit. And that kind of gives the drums more of a compressed feel. And then I would also sidechain the bass to the kick. And this one is a pretty aggressive sidechain because a lot of times your kick and your bass are competing for the same frequency space. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But, any melodies that are kind of like background melodies, any ear candy type stuff, like jingly kind of stuff, I have some of that in here. That is also sidechained to the kick. So, the majority of the stuff in this song is sidechained to the kick. Okay, sidechaining, it's huge. Use it. It is one of the biggest things that changed the game for my sound. Real quick, while you're here, definitely go ahead and hit that like button if you're feeling like you're getting some value from this video. I do stuff like this every single week, and you hitting that like button definitely helps out the channel because it tells YouTube you enjoy this content and they start recommending it to more people. But also, you get some better suggestions in your feed for more content like this. So thank you for hitting that like button. Appreciate that. Back to the content. So what's next? Auto pan. It's really, really, really easy. And here's some things that I use auto pan on. Hi-hats a lot. I also auto pan melodies sometimes. I use auto pan to do my risers as well. Auto pan, all you have to do in order to auto pan something, let's use this melody right here. Here we go. Yeah. Yeah, you can hear some of that sidechain compression kicking through. But we're going to go ahead and go into add audio effect, and we're going to go to auto pan. Now it's going to pull up this little window down here at the bottom, and all you have to do is set sync mode on. What that's going to do is sync it to your tempo. Now you can definitely have it not synced and have it go at your own rate, but I use sync mode most often. Sine wave, you can change your wave style. I generally use sine wave because you're getting the most consistent wave, smooth wave. You're not having jagged cuts and changes. So I keep it on sine wave. And I generally try to use the triplet functions. So this is quarter note triplet. If you do it right on the beat, it kind of gets a little bit robotic. So let's hear what this sounds like. Auto panned. It's already turned on. You can control the depth. Depth is literally how much is going to go left or right. So just like you have a pan knob and you twist it however far you want to the left, however far you want to the right, this is telling you how much you can go in each direction. So you're going 50% of the way, 50% of the way, or you can go 100. I wouldn't generally go 100 unless you want just a crazy effect, but I'll probably go 60 or 70. Let's hear what that sounds like. I kind of like that. Let's hear what that sounds like in context. I feel like that sounds good. All right, so That was auto pan. Let me not slow down. Let me keep this moving. All right. We got stereo separation. We got side chaining. We got auto pan. Next thing up is filter sweeps. This is pretty huge. A lot of songs that you've heard probably have filter sweeps in there somewhere. And I used some in here. I did automate some filter sweeps into this main synth right here at the beginning. So if you listen, I'll just play the whole thing. You'll hear the synth goes up to high frequency and then kind of goes down. Here's what it is. Yeah, this right here. Now, if I didn't do that at all, this is what that would sound like. A little less interesting, in my opinion. I think the filter sweep really adds something. Now, you can use filter sweeps for whole sections of a song, and that's really popular. That kind of like going underwater effect, and then it kind of opens up. You've all heard that, I'm sure. That is a filter sweep. And the filter sweep, I did it in Koala Effects, but you don't need Koala Effects. You could do the same thing literally with an SV filter. And you can just literally mess with this cutoff knob. And that is literally the same thing. And then you can automate that. You could literally just automate it with this knob right here. Make sure automations are turned on. Or you could map this to a macro. So you could just press and hold. Oh, sorry, it's a double tap. And hit macro controls. Macro 1, and boom. That is now controlling this. And I can record that in. That is the same thing as the filter that I used in Koala Effects. This is a really, really dope effect, and it's been used by a lot of producers. When I started doing it more often, it changed the game for me. So filter sweeps definitely do that. On that note, you might notice that as we're doing this stuff, it's like this is a lot of extra stuff, and we're not talking about actually like the music making process. And it can seem like, gosh, you really do this on all of your songs? That would just kill my creativity. This is the thing about learning how to do things that make your music sound professional. The more you do them, the more it just becomes part of the music making process. Literally, I didn't like do a separate session to go back and like go in and do all these effects. I did this while I was creating, and it really didn't take long because I've done it enough times to get used to it. So incorporate this stuff into your music, and it really won't take long to get used to it. Number 5 out of 6. We're getting there to the end. This one's really basic, but it takes probably the most time. That's EQ literally almost everything. Just EQ it. It's pretty important. Why do I say that? Because every sound that you hear has a spectrum of frequencies. So you're gonna have some high end, you're gonna have some low end. Nothing is purely one bit, unless you've really EQ'd it down into that, which is kind of what I'm getting at. But there's always gonna be some low end and some high end, and that's because of the rooms that these things are recorded in, or just the quality of the sound, the frequency, the note. So what I'm saying about EQing everything is it's important to know where you want everything to sit in the frequency spectrum. So kicks, I kind of stopped EQing kicks because I use some kicks that are really well EQ'd. Now, if that's not your case, you might have to do some fine tuning. But generally what you want your curve to look like on an EQ for a kick would be a little bump in the low mids, like not all the way in the bass end, but kind of in the low mids, and then you probably want a peak a little bit in the high end. That is going to help you get, a nice punchy kick that isn't boomy. When it comes to basses, like a live bass guitar or like a sub bass, a lot of times you're gonna want to do a roll off on the end of your bass. I'm going to show you how to do this, by the way. Roll off anything lower than around 18 to 20 hertz because the human ear really doesn't hear that. But it will come through if you have the right kind of speakers, like in the car, or if you got some big speakers somewhere. It's going to kill the mix in those situations. So you really want to roll off those extra frequencies. And then in the high end, you're going to want to have a little bit of a bump so that you can still hear that on things like cell phone speakers and stuff like that. So notice I'm really thinking about where my music is going to be played when it comes to EQing. Let me actually show you guys a little bit of the EQing that I've done here. So my bass, I believe, is this track right here. Yeah, that's the one. So this is what my effects look like for that. So I got Pro Q3. Now, like I said, you do not need to purchase another plugin, but this happens to be a plugin I've purchased. But you can use the stock EQ in BeatMaker 3 or whatever your DAW is. It's plenty good enough. I just like the layout of this one. So notice this is what my curve looks like on a bass. On most basses, I do this pretty similar. Some of them I'll fine tune more than others, but this is what I do. So this is a roll off after 17.765 hertz. Everything below there, I've tapered it off, and you can control how steep of a curve you want in this particular plugin, and I like it to be pretty steep. So that's just going to roll off those extra frequencies so you don't get a big boomy mix. Up here is the peak. I've added a little bit of in the high range so that we get some of those higher overtones in the cell phone speakers. So that is the way I EQ'd that. Let's see, what else have I EQ'd here? How about this piano? Yeah, I just used an SV filter. I wanted a little bit of roll off the top. That's an EQ right there. An SV filter. It's just a single value filter. It's just taking one value out of the EQ, and I'm bringing it, the cutoff on the highs down a bit. So there's another pad in here. It's just the same pad, but it's an octave lower, and here's what it sounds like. Yeah, so that's it right there. And then, so what I did was, without my EQ, it would have sounded really pretty bad. But let's go to that EQ right now. So I rolled off a lot of the lows because the low end is really cluttered with those chords, and I really didn't want it to be boomy down there. I just wanted some mids out of this. So the higher pads that I'm playing, they're taking care of the high range. All right, that's what I wanted them to do. Now I'm using these to take care of the mid range. So I thought about that. I've got two different sets of pads. One's kind of handling my high range, one's handling my low range. I bumped up the high mids a little bit, and I cut off the highs a lot, and I cut off the lows a lot. So that's my EQ. What I'm saying here is take some care into thinking about what part of the frequency spectrum your specific instrument takes up. Even voices. This is really important with voices, but we're not going to get into voices right now. But, all right, EQ. EQ everything. We got that, right? All right, the last one. Reverb. Use reverb, but use it tastefully. This is very important. Many of us use reverb, but we don't use it tastefully. And usually when we use it, we end up bathing it in reverb, and it just kills the mix. All right, there's several things that I have reverb on, and the amount of reverb I use definitely varies. Now, again, there is a stock reverb built into my DAW. There's a stock reverb built into most DAWs. I did not happen to use the stock reverb, but everything I'm going to be talking about you can do with stock reverb. This main melody right here, I have a good amount of reverb on. All right, now if I didn't put any reverb on that, listen to how boring this would sound. So the original sound has a little reverb on it, but I added a little bit more with this right here. So what I did was I added a reverb, and I put some, I controlled the mix. You can do this in almost any reverb. I just brought it down a little bit below 50%, controlled how big I wanted the room to be, made it a little bit brighter, and I made it nice and stereo wide. All right, that's all I really did here. Now this EQ happens to have some options for controlling the EQ of your reverb, which I think is super dope with FabFilter. So if you can, FabFilter is really dope for all of your mixing needs, but this is not a commercial for that. I added a little bit of a roll off on the highs because I didn't want the high end too much of this reverb, so I rolled it off. I don't think you can do that with the stock one, but that's not that important. I have these really cool effects that happen during that melody, so let's see. Yeah, those toms, good amount of reverb on that. Listen to this effect right here. that definitely has reverb on it. So I'm gonna give you guys a bonus tip. The reason this is a bonus tip is because it's actually using a plugin. I wanted this to be about free things specifically. But for those of you that are interested in something that's based in a plugin, check this out. Pitch warble. That is my number 7, my bonus tip to you. Having some waver in the pitch of your instrument. So here's the thing, as an instrumentalist myself, and someone who's been around a lot of instrumentalists, most of the time when you're making music, something is always moving in the sound, right? And sometimes that thing is pitch. Sometimes you want crystal clear pitch all the way through, but a lot of times, especially with things like vibrato, which is a natural, it's something that you do when you play an instrument or even when you sing. A lot of people sing with vibrato. Vibrato is literally just an alteration in pitch. It's a variation in the pitch. Now, there's something to tapping into the way natural music is made when you're doing music production. You want to try to make your stuff that you've programmed in or stuff that you've played from like a plugin, you want that to sound pretty natural. So having some waver in there is really, really going to help. So I use that actually on this main pad here. Just kind of fluctuating up and down. I don't know if you can really tell, but so what I've done is I actually used the vibro flange feature in Koala FX. Now I get that that's not a pure vibrato, but it really does handle the effect. Now, I didn't use a ton of it, but it's just enough to give it that little bit of warble in there. Now there's other things that you can use to do this. For example, you could use a plugin like Flytape 2. I could load that up, and there's literally a warble button, and you can press hold to leave it on. The reason I don't really like that so much is you can only use the presets. You can't really adjust how much warble you get, and the presets tend to be too much warble in my opinion. So that right there has been my 6 tips plus a bonus. 6 ways to get your music to sound way better for free. So definitely implement these. They're gonna change the game in your music production if you can do these things consistently. Think of them. Just have those. Write this list down. Set it on your desk so that you have them to think about when you're making your music. You got your list right there to help you out. So let me know if that helped you guys in the comment section. I would love to know which tip was your favorite tip. Which one is the one that's like, oh yeah, that's gonna be big for me. Let me know down in the comment section. I would love to chat it up about that. All that said, creatives, go make something dope, and I'll see you in the next video.